Now this video is going to be, like many others, quite controversial, but it's going to be me just thinking about and analysing what it is that we're experiencing at the moment. And obviously with the dust starting to settle regarding the US elections or selections, there's obviously a huge divide going on inside of the United States. And I'm thinking about this back in terms of when the Brexit happened inside of the UK. And at the time, I was extremely ecstatic about the outcome of England leaving the EU. And as time goes by, which it has done since June, what has exactly changed inside of the UK? Well, the pound has been destroyed. There's still constant battles regarding whether it is actually going to be implemented. And I'm thinking in terms of the US elections, because obviously the same mentality will be taking place currently. There will be those people who are ecstatic about the outcome of Hillary losing and Trump being the electee president who will take office in January 2017. Now, it appears that the globe, Earth, the plane, whatever it is that you believe it to be, there appears to be some form of corrective wave coming over us with a new beginning possibly emerging and taking us out of this massively corrupt, elitist, globalist run system with breakthrough nations electing and selecting and implementing change within our social dynamic. I'll give you a few examples. So we've got the US change of the Guard, which is the globalist run organization, which is known as the US corporation, supposedly being transferred into power of a free, unaffiliated person of the people, Donald Trump. You have the UK breaking free from the shackles of the EU nations, of Brussels. You have the Philippines with their President Duterte breaking free of the corrupt drug culture in that area. And this is just but a few. You then have many nations inside of Europe who will be holding selections in the new year regarding, again, change of powers. And you can see this shift occurring, which you would assume is creating a breakup of the original establishment. But I want to try and think about this in a different terms, because personally I've had time to reflect the last couple of weeks with all this current information bombarding us regarding the US election and the sense of change occurring. How much of this actually is change? And a lot of this also reflects again to the Brexit, because we are all tied together in this Western bloc, which is daisy chain linked through the whole banking industry, and everything ties into the same agenda, no matter how you see it. Now obviously you know this channel, predominantly its backbone is around the precious metals markets. That is the forte of this channel. But it is such a small element, because we also cover the geopolitical aspect and also diverse into other forms of thinking, because everything is not the way it is perceived. There is propagandas in place everywhere. There is huge amounts of disinformation being released, and perhaps some things that I read topic-wise through various links seem very relevant and interesting to me, and equally may be disinformative. So we all sometimes get led down certain roads, whether we think it's for the right cause or the wrong cause. Our gut instincts, if you're not a psychopath, is believing that it to be of a good cause in this alternative media. But a lot of people get jaded eyes, and it's something that video producers like myself need to constantly analyze ourselves and the content that we're putting out, as well as the information that we're absorbing, because it all has a direct influence on what it is that we produce, by what it is that we source and read. Now there comes an element where you have to be able to read everything, filter out the garbage, and present it in a format that is understandable. But obviously I don't make any claims to be anything other than a regular guy like you who is listening. We are all trying to understand what it is that we are seeing, what it is that we are hearing, and if you really do have the ability to then share it with other people. Because so much of humanity is stuck inside of a selfish nature, while there are a few people who are out there actually trying to help individuals to see, realize, learn, and then share what it is that they have then discovered. Because that is how you then transform what has been indoctrinated into us from the beginning. We have to see things with open eyes, and it is so easy to get led down the wrong path, believing it is the right path. So why is it that I'm saying these things? Well, the more time that you get to absorb information and don't constantly be bombarded with information, it gives you time to digest. And when you have time to digest and disconnect, you can then ground yourself, like you're earthing yourself back to the root cause, which is what is correct information, what is a real agenda behind all of this. So it's a rebalancing, and everybody requires a rebalancing, especially in the fast-paced world that we live in. So everything that I'm going to say here on is based upon objective thinking, multiple scenario agendas, for you guys to then take it as food for thought with a pinch of salt, and to conclude on your own terms whether you think what I say is relevant or has some merit. My thinking goes like this. During the Brexit scenario, I think to myself, was it really the people that voted? Or did the establishment want to leave the EU? Now, if we think about it in terms of British elite class being locked into a dictatorship set by Brussels, how does that lie with the lords and the ladies of the land, and the Queen and the princes and everybody who once ruled the UK? What about when 60% of the UK law was taken and set by self-elected appointed people inside of Brussels in effectively a dictatorship form? Now, I'd imagine the whole scheme around the EU was promised as something amazing that every nation inside has to be part of to grow a strong economic base. But look how that turned out. You can see how every dynasty over time, now whether that's the right word or not, probably not, but you'll get my gist. Whether that's the right dynasty, whether that's the correct, they can only grow so large before they consume themselves. Like the British Empire, like the Roman Empire, and like many other empires before it. Eventually, the snake will eat its own tail. History tells you that. There is not enough resources within to sustain the appetite of the few. And that is why you're seeing a breakup of the EU nations. And quite likely, as we know, any election where the people have any say would have been made illegal decades ago if it had an impact. The small people have no say in the world of the oligarchs. And that's an important message to remember inside of the current structure we live in. Because when you control all the keys to all the doors, how is it physically possible to lose power, to lose a decision? Now, of course, you can state, you may have warring factions. One side of oligarchs against another. And this may be the case. I'm not saying that I have all the answers to everything. I'm just putting topics out there for you to think about and to share my view. Nothing more, nothing less. So with that said, you would assume people that hold power within of a nation would only lose it via being eliminated and killed off. So going back to this Brexit situation, which actually is relevant to other topics that I'm going to discuss because time has passed and supposedly time is the best healer. Now, months and months after the actual Brexit situation, we're aware that they're trying to derail it. They're trying to delay or water down the possible arrangement with the powers that be in Brussels. We're aware that things are corporation controlled. Everything is directly related to a corporation, be it law, be it selections, be it the flow of capital. Now, I am of the impression that the reason this has happened is because Brussels is now seriously lobbying the MPs in the UK regarding watering down, which are likely to be discussed and agreed upon in 2017, if it even gets that far. So moving on out of that subject and into the US section regarding Donald Trump. There's a few videos that have been posted regarding who exactly he is. Now currently, America will be in that divide of either euphoria or rage. The same was with the Leave and Stay campaign in the UK. It seems people no longer accept things for what they are. The people have spoken, allegedly, and we must accept that. It seems people are trying to always redo things if they're not happy with the outcome. Some might say, this isn't a computer game. You only get one go. This is it. And the reason I say, some say it's like a computer game, is because some relate it into a matrix system. Now, I won't be going into that during this video, so don't worry. But you have to think outside of the box in order to keep yourself cognitively thinking about agendas and moves to make sure you're not slipped and hoodwinked into an agenda. Because believe it or not, it's way too easy to fall into that category and then find yourself fighting for the wrong agenda, which falls into the hands of obviously those few elite that are trying to control things. And that is the purpose of this video, because now we're going to discuss Trump. Now, referring to this video, it is alleged that he is a member of the Illuminati, either directly or inadvertently through bloodline. The outline of his father was that he used to run speakeasies and brothels inside of cities, inside of the States, and that he was part of the KKK, being linked obviously into extreme racism, going to various universities, in Pennsylvania being the last, and obviously he's linked to deep mafia connections. Now, before you get angry at things that I'm going to be saying in this video, you need to be just open-minded, because I hope more than anything that all these waves that are occurring around the planet are not sinister and actually are genuine freedoms from the establishment. I want that more than anything. I want them to be true light forms that are occurring to cleanse the system that we have. But being the person that I am, I don't trust everything at face value. So we can only see what happens in time, whether things do become undone and people are arrested and laws are abolished that have been put in place to enslave humanity further and to serve the globalist corporate oligarchs. So with these allegations that Trump is tied into mafia connections, has paid off multiple officials regarding creating mass development construction projects globally, because in that, the standard operating procedure is to bribe to speed up the process of either land applications, governmental approvals. You always have to be connected. And obviously Donald Trump has been connected with and rubbed shoulders the highest social standing oligarchs of the West and the East. Now when you rub shoulders and move in circles of that level, things become possible. You know the right people to talk to. And don't forget that the actual mafia in the underworld is always connected to the mafia of government. So what's the relevance of saying all that? Well, Trump is linked to the Clintons, and many a time they have been seen and photographed together, which isn't obviously an incriminating factor in itself, or proven guilty via association. But if you think certain topics aren't discussed in these dinner parties and closed-door discussions of extremely wealthy and connected people, then you're deluded. That's how the current system works. Now, something else I noticed, which I'm sure many of you also noticed, during the election selection process, how many times was Donald Trump seen to be throwing Masonic hand symbols during his speeches? Many times I spotted a 666 symbol, which if you're not part of an Illuminati agenda and you're in that high society, you are aware of that agenda. You are aware of symbols, symbologies. So if I personally was Donald Trump and I was given speeches, I would just use regular hand gestures. I wouldn't use gestures that are linked to Masonic nature. So that was the first thing that made me suspicious. Now, for those of you who are saying, yeah, but the establishment were against him, the whole media were against him. So let's analyse that aspect of everything was against him. Now, what is the root agenda of evil? And how does this evil manipulate people, the markets and the masses of the minions it has associated with its empire? Well, it deceives. The snake deceives. So go along with me on this process of thinking, well, perhaps this whole thing is nothing more than a massive deception. Because as we know, humanity is intelligent. Some of us, anyway. Many others are just brain-dead zombies, which are totally unsavable due to their brains being indoctrinated into mush. But we'll leave that there. So from my perspective, the greatest deception would be something along the lines of this. When you are an oligarch dynasty family and you have nothing better than to plot and scheme against humanity, smoking cigars and drinking your favourite tickle, laughing with your Yale buddies about how to control the herd, because that's all people are seen to be to the landowners that we reside on, cattle. So with the cattle being of higher intellect than the standard cow, we have to be treated in a different way. Now, as you're aware, politics, elections are nothing more than a show, are nothing more than garbage for the brain and people to debate, wasting time, wasting energy, creating confrontations, hostilities from red versus blue, when in effect, none of it actually makes any difference. And this is what it boils down to, because I've put this into a context of what I would probably do if I was in that scenario. And how would you control? Well, the best way would be to deceive the people. Now, obviously, times have changed greatly in the last 100 years, obviously because of the internet. The free so-called alternative media now being all over the place, YouTube, private websites, etc. So when these oligarchs, dynasties are sitting about talking about how can we change through this transitional system and possibly reset this huge financial structure that we have built, mocking the masses into converting their time and energy into worthless fiat paper, into worthless, meaningless trophies like the latest iPhones or flat screen TVs, or upgrading from one home to another, and then spending the rest of our 48 weeks a year working for it. And the reason I left 4 weeks off is because most of the West gets 4 weeks paid holiday if you work within a system. So back to the deception aspect. You control the system outright. You own the systems outright. Think in terms of George Soros. You own the voting machines. You program the voting machines. You count the voting machines. So how do they lose an election? Well, if you think of it as, well, they control everything. How would they have lost? Perhaps they haven't lost. Because you have to understand that the masses are angry and pissed off with the current systems. And they want change. So in order to maintain order, you have to give the people the impression of what it is that they want, regardless of whether they actually even get change. So introduce the two candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton obviously heavily backed by the corporations, heavily backed officially by George Soros, donating millions of dollars. But understand, millions of dollars is nothing to these people, the people that control everything. It wouldn't matter if it was 100 million, a billion. They can just create more. That's where the deception has been apparent. Because what's to say that they haven't wanted the underdog the whole time? The people's choice. To create that impression of change. Now obviously you see the released documents regarding how much donations have been received by Hillary. An agreement simply could have been made with Donald Trump in a backdoor room by quite possibly George Soros himself. Something along the lines of, hey Donald, we can see that the people are getting angry at the Clinton, Bush, Obama situation, and we have to give the impression of change. Now, we have a situation regarding our financial industry, and you're more than aware of that, and we have to bring it crashing down to reset this whole system and maintain control and order. So, as your bloodline, the Trump dynasty, is new inside of our system, inside of our inner circle, we're going to give you an opportunity to set your name in stone inside of the elite circle. But it's going to cost you your reputation. It's going to cost you your name. But we will repay your family and create a dynasty in your memory if you sacrifice what it is that we ask, and in return you will be among us. And this is quite honestly something that may have occurred. I wondered why a few years ago Trump was put into that TV show You're Fired, which was a spin-off from the UK of Sir Lord Sugar, Alan Sugar. And perhaps that was the whole plot years ago in order to raise awareness of obviously Donald Trump into being a household name globally. Because you can't just have any old candidate becoming president. They have to be globally known. And coming from the UK, the only candidates that I knew out of a long list were about 3 or 4. Obviously Clinton and Trump being the majority of a household name. So in order to fool the people, they give the impression that the people get what they want. All the while, that person is the fool guy for the system, promising everything that is the people want. Multiple assassination attempts taking place, but never succeeding, all in order to bolster that this Trump is anti-establishment, that he is for the people. It's food for thought, guys. Perhaps this whole system is only ever manipulated and changed, and it never moves from the main power source. The puppets are always on stage. The puppet masters are always in control at every conceivable time. And that is more logical to me than any form of freedom being created through an uprising. Unless blood is directly spilt of the inner circles, and the head of the snakes are physically cut off and removed, much like what occurred in Iceland, when they removed the whole Rothschild family out of the banking institutions, cutting the head from the snake. Now, the Rothschilds aren't the top of the ladder. There are other things above human form, I believe, because we know the Illuminati sacrifice and worship darker forces. And that's also why I've been covering various other topics outside of the general geopolitical situation, because for me it's relevant. For me, it's interesting to step outside of that comfort zone. So something else I'd like to add would be the new whole political geo stage, which could be a new age agenda linking all families and dynasties with a global tie of power. Something like power being passed from east to west or west to east during whatever the reset situation may be, and that all political leaders, east and west, could effectively be playing their part in deceiving not only their people, but playing a role on the political stage, whether it be in creating the impression of hostility towards another nation, or be it offering a solution to a situation, all in order to fool people into believing that their agenda is what is in the people's best interests, or is in resolving the situation for the people's best interest. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. The current situation with the West and the East being the constant pressure of conflict and war with Russia. President Putin might be behind the scenes agreeing to act as the opposing force and contradicting the West's force, obviously in Syria and other Middle Eastern countries. It's a long stretch, I know, but you can't rule it out as a global agenda, because when all families of hierarchy, royalty, bloodlines could effectively be in cahoots with each other behind the scenes, and they all effectively take time over the millennia to rule the mega superpowers in their own state, it could literally flow that way. When they have to reset one market or a combined market, the only natural flow is it then moves 180 degrees to the other, much like the Western control now transfers over to the Eastern hold. And we know Chinese dynasties go back thousands of years, and we know the Western's grip goes all the way back through Roman to Greek times. And much of the symbology and architecture and monuments in the West go all the way back to Egyptian and Roman times. Now, why would people still be constructing what is effectively homage to previous religions and gods? You can see statues and obelisks all around the United States, all around London, with deep-rooted landmarks of ancient origin, simply because perhaps the head of the snake is never truly cut. It just grows a new one and moves into a new family dynasty, or they change the name, much like the Rothschilds changing into the Rothschilds. The Queen of England under the Windsor name once wasn't the Windsors. The House of Windsor name used to be called the Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and that was prior to the 1917 period, and that rooted obviously back into Germany. And if you watched my last video and you managed to get all the way through, you would have learned that many of the heads of state, kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers, have a high likelihood of not only the psychopathic gene, but quite likely not even full human DNA. And I'll just leave that one there. But again, it's all food for thought into thinking that this set motion of events that are occurring may all be occurring perfectly to plan through the agenda, as you would anticipate for somebody that maintains control of not only the entire financial sector, global sector, humanity sector, food sector, every single sector of this planet is controlled. So how would they lose control of that? If you really deeply look into this situation, it may appear to be a win for the people, much like the Brexit scenario was for the UK. So let's just hope, shall we, that this really is going to be the cleansing that is required. But if it's not, then it really comes down to the fact that serious cooperation and actions are the only thing that will change what it is that we call this reality. We all know about the metals markets, the financial situation. We know the collapse can happen at any particular point, and there's only so much updates you can do regarding precious metals before you start repeating yourself and sounding like a one-trick pony. However, those topics generally attract the higher volumes of audience, which is a shame really, because it shows how much you lack in diversifying your time into education. You only want to hear about the financial element. The whole financial element is a complete scam. All it ever is converting your time and energy for a 1 and 0 on their system. It's been covered so much that there's other topics that we should really discuss and cover and spend our time on, trying to understand and objectively, creatively think about scenarios that may be occurring. Of course, we live in a world where we require funds to live. You can't get away from that. And that is another reason that I include advertisements inside of the videos. Because there's certain bills, obviously my end, that have to be paid in order for me to continue doing what it is that I do. And that is exactly where people's generosity via donations really help out. So a quick thank you to all you guys who do donate to this channel. So the issue that we face, can we actually do anything about anything without sounding defeated? You have to be positive about creating a change, because it's the people that can create change, the masses. If they actually have the ability to stand up and cut the head off the snakes, that will create a change. But when you've had multi-decade brainwashing and fear of the state, fear of repercussion, fear of not paying taxes, fear of just fear, people are locked into the system of having no ability to step outside of what they believe is the safe zone, the right zone, the indoctrinated zone. How is it somebody's right to tell you that you have to pay them for living on this earth, when supposedly it is a God-given right? Because that's the way it is. Well, it's the way it's been designed. So now that we have both perspectives of whether or not Trump is working for the good force, or whether he is working for the evil force. Time will tell. Perhaps many of his promises will take many months to materialize, during which time, if he even gets into the office before a system collapse, bearing in mind that he quite likely is going to be the fall guy, and I believe he's going to be the fall guy to keep the Clinton name from being tarnished, because we know the Clinton dynasty of political leadership is the same as the Bush dynasty of being the main puppet stage entertainers for the masses. Trump? Who's Trump? Just some guy, some billionaire who is sacrificing that name to go down in the history books for the greatest collapse the world has ever seen. You can see how that will be initiated just as Obama leaves the office. What can Trump physically do with a market meltdown the day or a few days or a day after or a week after he walks into office? There's nothing he could physically do to correct the market. What can he do? Print money? Print fiat currency? Well, it's already at 20 trillion. What's he going to do? Print another 20 trillion to prop up the market? Well, that doesn't fix it, does it? So it's going to have to go into a reset phase. And that is why we see the whole reset occurring. That is why you see huge banks buying up huge reserves of gold. They can only produce so much gold a year. So you're going to see a huge reset in the valuation of gold when it is linked to bonds and the derivative market in order to prop up from that system failing entirely. So we got a 2-month window right now to not only watch what is going on, but to watch with a dubious eye. Listen to everything but trust nothing, including myself, because I'm nothing more than just another guy on the internet. I'll leave it there for the minute, guys, and I'll be back soon with more.